Good afternoon. I am League member and co-chair of Voter Services, Diane D'Imperio, and I will be the moderator for the State of Florida House of Representatives District 1 panel. There are two candidates in the race for this House seat, Chuck Clemens and Kaiser Enneking. Chuck Clemens, the Republican candidate for this seat, was invited multiple times, both in writing and in person by the telephone, but has declined to participate. This panel will proceed with the Democratic candidate, Kaiser Enneking. This decision should not be interpreted as an endorsement of the candidate. As a reminder, the League of Women Voters does not endorse candidates nor affiliate with parties. Thank you, Kaiser Enneking, for joining us today. State representatives are elected in a partisan election for a two-year term and may be elected for up to 4 terms. Candidates must live in the district that they represent. The panel will consist of an opening statement of no more than 1.5 minutes, 6 questions which have been prepared by the League of Women Voters, and you will have 2 minutes to answer each one. And then there will be 1.5 minutes for a closing statement. You will be able to see the timer who will indicate your remaining time at 30 seconds and when it's time to stop. Please stop when your time is up or your microphone may be muted. You may begin, Kaiser Enneking, you may begin with your opening statement and you will have 1.5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Diane and Deborah, for putting this on, and thank you to all the League of Women Voters. I can't think of anything more important to our democracy than to have informed voters, and so I really appreciate this opportunity. My name's Kaiser Enneking. I'm running for House District 21. And when I started this journey, I didn't know that I would be running for office during a pandemic. But during a pandemic, indeed, we find ourselves. And what we have found out during that pandemic has fueled my desire to serve as a public servant in Tallahassee even more. Because what we have found out is that our public health system that has had both budget and personnel cut over the last 10 years has really not been up to making sure that all of our citizens were safe. And what we have found out is that our public education system is really struggling to keep our kids safe. What we have found out is that our unemployment system was designed for failure and has done that spectacularly. What we have found out is that the issue that has singularly driven me to office of Medicaid expansion, when I first started talking about it, we had somewhere between 500 and 800,000 citizens in Florida who would be eligible. Today, it's 1.4 million. And so we have big issues in Tallahassee, and I would like to represent this district.
Thank you. We will now move on to our prepared questions. You will have 2 minutes to answer each one. Our first question is, what do you think are the most important things to accomplish in the 2021 legislative session?
Well, actually, the first thing that I thought was important was one that I won't get to vote on, and that was to have a special session as the pandemic crashed upon Florida. Chuck Clemens voted no. In that special session, we would have discussed Medicaid expansion, election security, and the unemployment system. And those are clearly 3 issues that we need to make sure are available to all Floridians. I think the first issue we will have to tackle will be the unemployment system because people are hurting and our economy is not going to recover until our tourism economy recovers and people feel safe coming here. So we need to take the pandemic on. We need to make sure that people are safe and that our visitors to Florida feel safe coming here. But in the meanwhile, we need our citizens to feel supported. That does mean fixing the unemployment system, but we are also coming upon a housing crisis as people begin to have to make decisions between paying their rent and paying for anything else. And so I think those are 2 areas that clearly the state needs to be involved in and needs to be involved in making sure that their citizens have opportunities.
The next question is, please describe the types of policies that cities and counties should be able to decide for themselves and those which should be decided by the state?
Oh, this is a really great question. I think it touches on what we call home rule. And in Florida, we had a very strong home rule law put into place back in the 1970s. For the past 10 years, our state legislature has chipped away at home rule. And by home rule, we mean which issues should a city or county commission be able to implement for their cities or counties, and which should be decided by the state. So truly, there have been things both big and small that the state has decided they have preeminence on, and that they have taken away the local authority. I think one of the most egregious was when Monroe County decided to ban sunscreens because of the known toxic effects of sunscreens on the reefs. And yet the state chose to overrule that decision of the citizens. What bothers me about this fundamentally is that city commissioners and county commissioners are much closer to their constituents than politicians are in Tallahassee. There's a reason why lobbyists would prefer for Tallahassee politicians to take away rule from cities and states. And it's because what happens in Tallahassee seems to stay in Tallahassee. It's much easier to give a few campaign donations to some strategic politicians. And it's much harder to do that on both a city or a county level. And so I believe strongly in home rule. And it is one thing that should go both ways. There are some things that some cities or counties may put in that I don't agree with, but as a state legislature, I should not be able to impose my beliefs on them, much like I think for things that we believe in here in Gainesville or Alachua County, the legislature shouldn't be able to impose their rule on.
For our next question, the pandemic has resulted in massive reduction in state revenue. What are your thoughts on responding to this situation in the coming year? And do you think Florida should reconsider its current taxing system?
So I think this is going to be a really tough question. In our Constitution, we know that we have to have a balanced budget. And I think that means that we're going to have to make sure that our priorities are straight when we get to Tallahassee. I will remind you that on the eve of this pandemic, our state legislatures, including our current legislator from House District 21, voted to give $50 million for pandemic relief and $521 million in tax cuts to the top 1% of corporations in this state. It's about priorities. We have the money to do what we need to do, but we can't do that while we are giving money away to corporations. And so I believe strongly that we are going to have to make sure that we got our priorities in order, because we're going to have to make some really tough decisions. I think I've heard this from every candidate today. This is not going to be a great year to be a legislator because there are going to be a lot of tough decisions to make. And I would agree with that. I don't think today I would change anything in our current taxation system, but I do think that we are going to have some serious consideration about what our priorities are.
Our next question is, what should the state's role be in preparing for and/or preventing the effects of climate change?
Well, so this is something where I do think that the state can have a huge effect. And I think one of the things that's really important is to recognize that Florida is ground zero for climate change in the United States, but Florida should also be ground zero for climate change policy. We saw during this pandemic how quickly the earth can solve its climate problems as we move away from fossil fuel. This was probably one of the clear silver linings to this pandemic. And so I think we need to move as fast as we can away from a fossil fuel based economy and into a renewable energy economy. And we should be the leader in solar and wind energy. We need to make sure that we ban drilling off of our shores, and we need to make sure that we ban fracking in every single way that it can be done, particularly the ways that it can be done in Florida, so that we move away from fossil fuels and into renewables. Renewables will provide jobs. They will provide energy for making sure that we have a sustainable economy as we move forward. And I would rather work on the root of the problem, which is of climate change, which is fossil fuels consumption, rather than work as much on resilience. But resilience is clearly going to be a part of the conversation. And so we need to have each community begin to take note of what impacts climate change is having. And we need to make sure that we have rules and regulations in place about development, particularly coastal development, to make sure that whatever is being developed in a sustainable way, because this is not going away, but we can do the best job that we can in making sure that we are prepared.
The next question. Please describe your thoughts on the plans and funding for the MCORS toll road system.
Oh, so MCORS, this is really politics that's at its worst, I think. What we saw was the state legislator, and it was with the priority of one person basically in the state legislature. Unfortunately, that person was the president of the Senate, who extracted their will on the rest of the state legislature that all went very willingly along. So the Florida Department of Transportation had made some recommendations about road infrastructure. Not one of them called for 3 new toll roads, but instead called for expanding existing roads. The Tri-County area of Levy, Gilchrist, and Dixie County are up in arms about this, as they well should be, because nobody, including their state legislator who voted for MCORS, went and informed them of got their ideas about it, got their input about it. Instead, that role has been left to the commissions that were appointed. And you know what? Those commissions, it looks like, have decided that perhaps maybe this isn't ideal. And in a time when we're going to have an incredible budget crunch in Tallahassee, I think $125 million for roads to nowhere that nobody wants probably is not our best investment of our tax dollars.
And our final question, Florida has one of the highest rates of uninsured adults in the country, and the recent pandemic-related job losses have increased that number. What can the state do to provide health care to over 800,000 low-income uninsured adults?
Well, the first thing that we need to do is to pass Medicaid expansion. This is an issue that I have really been advocating for several years. We know that every state that has passed Medicaid expansion has not only seen a reduction in their uninsured, but they've also seen an increase in the amount of income and revenue available to the state. So when the time when we need more state general revenue, this would be a great way for us to do that. It does that in a number of ways. One is it improves the economic stability of the people that receive the Medicaid expansion, in addition to making their health better. That economic stability allows them to pay taxes, to participate in the economy. In our area, expanding Medicaid would provide jobs, good jobs, jobs that we need in this area because we have such intensive healthcare systems here in the area. But those jobs are just in a portion of the district. If you go further west in this district, healthcare jobs are scarce because healthcare is scarce in those districts. And again, Medicaid expansion would help with sustaining rural hospitals and rural clinics like the Acorn Clinic that got shut down because it just didn't have enough funded patients to be able to sustain itself. So Medicaid expansion would help us on any number of levels. both on an economic level at the state, as well as on a personal level for those who receive it, as well as for other citizens that are receiving their health insurance through the Affordable Care Act health exchanges. We know that those people end up paying about 7% less in out-of-pocket costs in any given state that has an expanded Medicaid. And oh, by the way, that $5 billion that we are sending to Washington every year for other people's health care, I'd like to see that come back to the state of Florida.
Okay, you now have 1.5 minutes to make your closing statement.
So if you ask me what our biggest problem is facing Florida today, it's really the 20 years of decimated infrastructure that we have. After having 20 years of having a one-party system in Tallahassee, you can see the effects. This pandemic has really highlighted it. We don't have a plan for broadband. We have public schools with leaky roofs. We have thousands of miles of sewer lines that need to be replaced or placed. We have septic tanks that are leaky. We have an unemployment system that doesn't work. We have a public health department that wasn't up to a pandemic. We need public servants who are willing to go to Tallahassee to be the voice of the citizens. When you sign up to run for office, you sign up to represent everybody, but also to work hard at that. My opponent hasn't worked hard enough to show up to this today. He voted against a special session. I think that when we look at what leadership is, it's not about just signing things on signing day. It's about the work that you do every day to make your communities better. And I'm running for office truly because I want to make our communities better. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaiser Enneking, for participating in our forum today.
Thank you.
Before we let the audience go, we have just a few dates that we'd like to review. After all, this is a big election. We just want to make sure everybody is aware of these dates. The general election is scheduled for November 3rd. The polls will open at 7 in the morning and be open until 7 o'clock at night. On that day, you can vote in person at your assigned location only. So you might want to double check on the elections website to make sure that you know where that is. Other ways that you can vote in
All right, other ways that you can vote in person. You can do early voting starting on Monday, October 19th through Saturday, October 31st. And those early voting locations will be open from 9 to 6. And you can vote at any of those early voting sites. If you feel like you would like to request your mail-in ballot, make sure you do it by October 24th. It must be received in the elections office by 7 p.m. on November 3rd. So be sure you mail it by October 20th. So if you've requested your ballot after October 20th, be sure you take it to the drop boxes that are available at the early voting sites or on election day at the elections office, Supervisor of Elections, 515 North Main Street in Gainesville. If you're going to vote by mail, be sure you verify your address. You can do that on the Supervisor of Elections website. And it should be in the mail to you October 3rd. The first batch has already gone out. Be sure to read it and follow the directions. You must sign the envelope, the back of the ballot. The other information is optional, but don't forget to sign that. Follow up to make sure your vote was received and counted at votealachua.com. This is the website of the Supervisor of Elections of Alachua County, and you can look up your status and make sure your vote by mail was received. Or you can call. Their phone number is 352-374-5252. Thank you to everyone, to all the candidates and the audience. We appreciate your participation. A special thank you to our technical partner, Alpha Creative Studio. We hope you all have a good day.